which has requested for the floor on item 3, and they have requested to speak. So, with the authorization of the commissioners, if they agree with the proposed agenda as amended, it's not a substantial amendment. It's just that we would have NGOs in between the panel discussions due to time constraints so that they can take their flight. So, without much ado, for 1 hour maximum, I shall give the floor to our colleague to lead us in the first panel discussion. And I shall now give the floor to Commissioner Sassi to lead the panel on economic, social, cultural rights. And now, before the panelists take the floor, I would request them to facilitate her task. She may be willing to end in an hour, but please make her work easier so that when it's in an hour, so that they could hand back the floor to enable us to continue. So without much ado, Commissioner, I thank you very much, Chair. Permit me also in turn to welcome the delegations of states and representatives of civil society and NHRS and participants. As you were to the Chair, today we have a panel which will be on economic, social and cultural rights and national development plans in Africa, to be presented by the working group on economic, social and cultural rights in Africa of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. So, as stressed on several occasions by the Commission, Agenda 2030 of the United Nations on Sustainable Development, as well as the 2063 of the African Union, aim at ensuring the achievement of the human and economic and social rights of the population. The agenda is based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as all the instruments on human rights, and seek to ensure the enjoyment of human rights by all, so that no one is left behind. Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, on its part also has several aspirations on the same objectives, that is, especially aspiration 1 and 3 and aspiration 6. The African Union has also committed to mainstream 2030 agenda, 2063 agenda in the National Development Plan of its member states, and through the decision of the Executive Council 998 of 2018. The decision of the Executive Council, by that decision, and young member states to enhance integration or the mainstreaming of Agenda 2063 in their national development plans, and at the same time also mainstream Agenda 2030 of the United Nations. The implementation and the follow-up of the two agendas internally is done through the adoption of a raft of practices and programs and policies that in their national development plan, the 10-year plan of the second 10-year plan of the Agenda 20 states specifically that member states are expected to mainstream and implement the action through their national development strategies and policies, and that member states also should strive to mainstream the regional and continental frameworks in their national development plans. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights, through its working group on the economic, social and cultural rights, is fully committed to a comprehensive policy to support states so that they can comply with their commitments under Agenda 2063 and under Agenda 2030. And I also need to stress the existence of a body of laws for the protection of these categories of rights, and as well as the various protocols adopted by the Commission. The Commission has also prepared a number of guidelines to assist states to comply with their obligations. Thus, in 2004, the African Commission adopted the Pretoria Declaration on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights in Africa, and in 2011, it also adopted the Nairobi Principle concerning the enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights. And recently, in 2022, the Commission also adopted the General Observation 7. The Commission has also published guidelines for the preparation of reports on economic, social, and cultural rights in Africa, known as the Tunis guidelines, and which specifically emphasize the enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights. And the guidelines will also be reviewed shortly. The Commission has also continues to issue final observations for states on the basis of their national reports, which provide and which include the recommendation to states on the gaps to be plugged in the economic, social rights of their national plans. Nevertheless, and in spite of all these efforts, it seems that states have still not been able to mainstream totally the instruments in the regional and continental framework in their national development plans. We've noted that the preparation and the follow-up of national development plans are often carried out in the context and process and institutional process different from the one which support the implementation of national human rights obligations. The lack of coordination and mainstreaming could lead to the preparation of policies and development plans which would not fully respect human rights. That's why the African Commission on Human and People's Rights has expressed concerns in the face of these challenges and adopted on this basis during the 75th Ordinary Session in 2023 a Resolution 5701 on the realization of a study on the mainstreaming of economic, social, and cultural rights in the planning of national development in Africa. The resolution has also mandated the Working Group on Economic and Social rights to prepare a draft study on the economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as the national sustainable development programs in Africa. The realization of the study is ongoing with the support of our partners, namely the Danish Human Rights Institute, the Network of National Human Rights Institutions in Africa, and finally the Center, the Pretoria Center. It's against this backdrop that we are organizing today this panel in order to consider the potential of the African human rights system, its norms and mechanisms in guiding the said study, the sharing of experience, best practices, as well as challenges encountered by states and numerous actors and key partners of the Commission, and this would help and guide and help improve upon the drafting preparation of this study. So without much ado, I shall give the floor to our panelists to give us information about the action that they intend to undertake to carry out the study. So I shall start by giving the floor to Dr. Dorcas Basimanian of the Human Rights Center of the University of Pretoria, so that she shares the experience of Africa, some countries selected, the challenges and best practices in the mainstreaming of human rights-based approach in National Development Plan. You have up to 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Can we help her with the PowerPoint presentation? Now, can she start the presentation, please?
Indeed, we've been conducting a study on the integration of socioeconomic rights in national development planning in Africa with our partners, Danish Institute and NANRI. So we have selected 3 countries in Africa. We selected South Africa, Ethiopia, and Cote d'Ivoire. I'll just delve into the findings that we have established from the reports by our consultants. So this was indeed to answer the call, as the Commissioner has already stated, about the resolution on Resolution 561, which mandates stakeholders and state parties to contribute to a study on integrating socioeconomic rights in national development planning in Africa. So this resolution itself as the foundation for examining how socioeconomic rights, including how socioeconomic rights are considered in the planning processes by African governments, focusing on aligning development goals with human rights obligations. So this presentation and the study assesses the extent to which African countries have incorporated socioeconomic rights in national development plans, which case studies I just mentioned, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Cote d'Ivoire. So it analyzes the challenges, the gaps, and opportunities in implementing socioeconomic rights within national policies and strategies. And then it gives recommendations for enhancing the integration of socioeconomic rights in national development plans to promote human rights-based approach to ensure sustainable and inclusive development in Africa. Next slide, please. So we can look at the problems of integration of socioeconomic rights in national development plans. First, need to promote human dignity and equality. Socioeconomic rights such as the right to education, healthcare, housing, and social security that are fundamental to human dignity and equality. So integrating these rights into NDPs ensures that they are prioritized in national policies and programs aiming to uplift the marginalized and the vulnerable populations. Legal obligation, to create legal obligations. So many countries have ratified the international human rights treaties that require them to protect, respect, and fulfill socioeconomic rights. Incorporating socioeconomic rights in national development plans will help governments fulfill their legal obligations under these treaties. So it is also important to achieve holistic development. NDPs, they typically outline the country's long-term development goals and strategies. So by including socioeconomic rights, governments can ensure that development efforts are comprehensive and address not only economic growth, but also social justice and the human well-being. It also reduces inequality. Socioeconomic rights are often critical in addressing systemic inequalities. So by integrating these rights into national development plans, the governments can implement targeted policies and governments to reduce poverty, inequality, and social exclusion. Also, it promotes accountability and monitoring. So incorporating socioeconomic rights in national development plans, it provides a framework for accountability. It enables civil society organizations, human rights institutions, and citizens to monitor government progress in fulfilling these rights and hold them accountable for any shortcomings. Long-term sustainability. Sustainable development requires a focus on both economic progress and social well-being. Socioeconomic integration, it ensures that development efforts are sustainable over a long term, fostering inclusive growth and resilient against economic shocks. International reputation. Internationally, countries are increasingly judged on their commitment to human rights, including socioeconomic rights. So integrating socioeconomic rights in national development plans can enhance a country's reputation and credibility in the global community. So overall, integrating socioeconomic rights in national development plans is not just a matter of legal compliance, but also a pathway towards a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development for all citizens. Next slide, please. Why human rights-based approach is relevant to national development planning? Human rights-based approach focuses on human dignity and well-being. So human rights-based approach will align NDPs with the overarching goal of improving human well-being by ensuring that development initiatives respect, protect, and fulfill fundamental rights. This makes development people-centered with the aim of achieving dignity for all, Ubuntu. Inclusivity and equity. Through human rights-based approach, NDPs emphasize reaching out to the most marginalized and vulnerable groups. It ensures that economic growth and development benefits are shared equitably across society, and that disparity, especially based on gender, race, disability, and socioeconomic status, are addressed. Empowerment and participation. So by embedding the HBRA in NDPs, governments commit to fostering active citizen participation in all the process of national development planning, including the design stage, implementation and evaluation of development policies. It gives individuals and communities a voice in the planning process, ensuring that their specific needs and rights are addressed. Accountability mechanisms. HRBA requires government to set up mechanisms for monitoring and holding themselves accountable for the realization of human rights. This makes NDPs more transparent, promoting good governance, adhering to laws and accountability in resource allocation and service delivery. Legal and institutional strengthening. And the HRBA encourages the strengthening of legal frameworks and institutions to ensure that they can effectively protect and promote human rights. It ensures that NDPs address the institutional changes needed to enforce laws related to human rights and development goals. Sustainable development. So by linking human rights and development, HBRA ensures that NDPs are aligned with sustainable development goals, particularly those related to poverty reduction, education, health, equality. This helps countries balance economic progress with the protection of social and environmental rights. And then lastly, international and national commitments. Many NDPs draw from international commitments, such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, regional human rights treaties, national constitutions. So HRBA ensures that national policies are consistent with these international standards, making NDPs globally compliant while addressing national realities. Next, why HRBA for national planning? Because it has potential to address the root causes of poverty. It helps address the root causes, the inequality, by focusing on power imbalances and structure and discrimination that prevents people, thank you, that prevents people from realizing their rights. Okay, I was just told I have 2 minutes, so let me get to the findings of the study that we conducted with our partners. So as I said, we did the study in 3 countries, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Cote d'Ivoire, which have shown to be very good national development plans, but the trends and gaps and lessons to draw. So the common trends among the 3 case studies is the incorporation, yes, of the socioeconomic rights sectors in the NDPs, not the human rights, but the sectors in all the NDPs. A lack of reference of human rights instruments in the NDPs. Meaningful participation of public, civil society, human rights commissioners is not consistent throughout all the processes of designing, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. The three NDPs proved to have mostly followed a capitalistic economic development approach upon formulation, not a human rights-based approach. Further, they have proven
As my time runs out, I just want to mention 2-3 things that I would just encourage the African Commission to also, look into for purposes of supporting NHRIs in integrating socio-economic rights in National Development Plan. The first one is to, advocate and promote clear operational independence for national human rights institutions, and also advocate for early involvement of national human rights institutions in development plan. And also, I think it's crucial for the African Commission to support the advocacy efforts of national human rights institutions for human rights-based approach to budgeting itself. And finally, strengthening collaboration between national human rights institutions and national statistical offices at the national level. Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur Folusso, pour votre présentation sur laquelle vous avez.
Folusso, for your presentation, you refer to the important role of NHRIs in the drafting of development plans. National plans, we should base on a human rights approach, and the challenges encountered by NHRIs in this process. We now go to the next and last panelist, Ms. Carol Rask, Chief Advisor, Danish Institute for Human Rights, who will do a presentation on the integration of ECOSOC rights in development plans in Africa. What does the data suggest? Thank you.
Much for giving me the floor, Commissioner. I do have slides. I'm not sure if it's possible to put it up. Yes, thank you. So we are honored to be supporting the Commission's Working Group on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, together with our partners represented here on the panel, in the upcoming draft study on economic, social, and cultural rights in national development plans in Africa. My presentation will focus on an analysis that the Danish Institute for Human Rights has made of all national development plans in Africa as input to this upcoming draft study. So next slide, please. So before moving into the analysis, I think it's worth taking a look in more detail at what Agenda 2063 has to say about human rights, and specifically human rights instruments. As the Commissioner has also mentioned, this regional development agenda, together with the 2030 agenda, is the inspiration for many national development plans in Africa. As you can see from this slide, Agenda 2063's first 10-year implementation plan, 2013 to 2023, which covered the period analyzed, called for the full implementation of several international and regional human rights instruments, including the Charter on Human and People's Rights. And all of these instruments, of course, have economic, social, and cultural rights provisions. Next slide, please. I will now move to the analysis carried out on national development plans by the Institute. In terms of the scope for this analysis, the analysis covered 52 national development plans in Africa from 2015 to date, and is based on the most updated plan available during this period as of January 2024, when we began this analysis. Methodologically, we have drawn on the Danish Institute's algorithm to assist us in managing what you can imagine is quite extensive data. However, all data has then been checked, adjusted, and analyzed by human rights experts. A few limitations need to be highlighted. One, we were not able to access all the latest national development plans. National development plans are, of course, of different lengths and thus detail across the region. And of course, the algorithm-assisted analysis, despite our own cleaning of the data, still has or still may have small margins of error in classifications. With the limitations in time, my presentation will focus on just two areas of this analysis. One is the degree and manner in which regional human rights instruments and mechanisms have been drawn on in national development plans. And secondly, how the human rights principle of equality and non-discrimination, which my colleagues before me have spoken about, has been integrated in these national development plans. Next slide, please. So moving to some of the findings, and again, some of my colleagues have already mentioned this. The first finding was that all national development plans analyzed, as this chart visualizes, included some human rights content related to almost all economic, social, and cultural rights. This finding is, of course, not surprising due to the large convergence in substance, as mentioned earlier, between sustainable development sectors and economic, social, and cultural rights. However, deeper analysis showed some gaps against the legal human rights standard, including the AAQ standard, accessibility, availability, acceptability, and quality standard recognized in the African Commission and Court's jurisprudence. For example, 3 in-depth analyses carried out on the health, water and sanitation, and the land and property sectors as part of this analysis did show mentions of access to health as a priority area, although not always including the accessibility challenges of particularly marginalized groups. No or very few national development plans brought in issues of acceptability, cultural and linguistic acceptability, aspects that are particularly important for some minority and indigenous groups, among others. Next slide, please. A second finding was that despite the fact that there is some content that could be linked to the normative content of economic, social, and cultural rights, national development plans rarely mention or refer to African regional human rights instruments as a basis for their development interventions. As we can see here on this slide, 9 out of the 52 national development plans, so just over 17%, made an explicit mention of 1 or more regional human rights instruments. From our analysis, which you can see above, it is the African Youth Charter, which is the instrument most frequently found, but only in 4 national development plans. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the main human rights instrument in the region, is mentioned in only 3 national development plans in Africa. However, only in one of these references is the Charter referred to as one of the legal bases for the national development plan or a sector in the plan. One of the examples of a good practice is the one you see on the screen from a state in Africa. The protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of women in Africa is mentioned in only 2 national development plans in Africa as the legal basis for work on gender equality in the plan. In terms of African human rights mechanisms, there is no explicit mention of these mechanisms in our analysis to date. There is one mention of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, but this is not in relation to a development sector. Our analysis also suggests that when these references are made, they're often limited to a few sectors in the National Development Plan. There are also a few examples where the legal content has been systematically used to move beyond identifying a legal basis and actually assisting in the identification of gaps, building objectives and priorities, and monitoring the results for specific sectors. Next slide, please. At the same time, and I'll go through this very quickly due to the lack of time, at the same time, we have also analyzed concluding observations from the African Commission in the period 2010 to 2022, and as you can see, there are a wealth of concluding observations and recommendations that can be drawn on by states in relation to many of these sectors. Next slide, please. Turning now to the integration of equality and non-discrimination, The analysis looked at the degree to which discrimination is a barrier to the enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights, and was mentioned in the national development plans. The analysis found that discrimination was mentioned in 33 of the national development plans in Africa. Although not mentioned often, reference to discrimination in these national development plans represents a positive step and a good practice. However, closer examination of the way in which discrimination was mentioned in these plans did point to areas where this could be further strengthened. In the first instance, unlike the example presented above from an African state, discrimination is rarely presented as a cross-cutting concern, relevant for all sustainable development sectors in the plan. For example, when discrimination was mentioned in the national development plans, it was most often related to access to health, labor rights, and education. However, as the figure below shows, discrimination was seldom mentioned in the sections in the National Development Plan dealing with adequate housing, land and property rights, or access to social protection. Secondly, as with the instruments, the language of discrimination rarely translates into specific objectives, activities, indicators, and actions which could address the structural barriers to discrimination, for example, in legislation and policy. Next slide, and my final slide. Turning further to some of the findings on discrimination, we note the following in terms of marginalized groups and the use of disaggregated data. First of all, most references to discrimination were related to gender-based discrimination and specifically discrimination against women and girls. This is, of course, a welcome finding. In relation to discrimination on the grounds of age, the groups most referred to are children and youth. There appears to be a gap in terms of references to discrimination faced by older persons. Discrimination of persons with disabilities was also mentioned, and sometimes quite extensively, in some national development plans. However, as seen here, discrimination related to LGBTIQ persons is largely absent from national development plans in Africa, only mentioned in one, and the same can be said for indigenous peoples. Furthermore, there is little information on multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. Population segments are mainly treated as broad groups: women, youth, children, minorities, etc. In addition, currently national development plans demonstrate an uneven picture of data desegregation. Elements of data desegregation is mentioned under different themes, but this is not reflected always across all sectors or for all relevant grounds of discrimination. So in conclusion, what we found were elements of good practice in a number of national development plans, but also areas where there is a need for some strengthening from a human rights-based approach. And thank you very much.
Je vous remercie, Madame Carole, pour cette présentation très détaillée, justement, sur laquelle vous êtes revenue sur les bonnes pratiques, mais également...
Presentations, you talked about good practices, but you placed emphasis on the various shortcomings that exist in the plans, the insufficiency of human-based approach. We are now at the interactive component of this panel. Discussions are now open. Let me start with those who that I have on the list before giving the floor. Before sharing the list, I would just like to request panelists to be as short as possible so that we can conclude these panel discussions according to the prescribed state. Angola, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the delegation of Angola, I take the floor to first of all congratulate the panelists for their brilliant presentations and also present our comments regarding this subject. For Angola, the progressive implementation of the cultural, economic, social rights is a priority and a commitment that is in the National Development Plan 2023-2027 that is focused on development of human capital. We would like to emphasize that PDM 27 includes a specific program for promotion of human rights. This National Development Plan is aligned to our long-term development plan, Angola 2050, that also uses leverage of human capital and builds modern and competitive infrastructure and intensify a prosperous economy and builds a sustainable ecosystem and a nation open to the world, safe with equal opportunity. Despite the economical crisis in the world and challenges that do exist not only in Angola, this National Plan 2023-2027 provides for 20% of the state budget to the social sector. Fortunately, this goal was achieved in 2023 with 30% of its budget execution. Fortunately, our President, João Lourenço, indicated in his speech that it's important that we continue to work for the stability of our public funds so that we have opportunity to implement measures and investments for the well-being of Angolans, focusing on education and health. And our National Development Plan also provides in the its priorities to support cultural communities, especially the Khoisan and also ethnic groups of Namibi, Wila, Kwandu Kubangu, through the program of studies and support of traditional communities named PEATA that provides for the development of integrated study on these groups. Our diversity makes us a rich country with a huge cultural wealth that has to be valued and made available so that can become a tourist product. We should also emphasize the role of religious institutions that continue to play an important role in supporting the state to build peace and rescue our moral values. Lastly, I would like to indicate that our National Development Plan is aligned to the Development Agenda 2063. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I now give the floor to Eritrea.
All protocols duly observed. Let me explain our policies on these issues. Mr. Chairperson, the state of Eritrea considers it a paramount significance, the promotion and safeguarding of economic, social and cultural rights. It is a testament to this principle that Eritrea continues to make unremitting efforts both through enacting policies and strategies that facilitate the implementation of various programs and tangible programs on the ground. Eritrea is now in the midst of implementation of both the following documents. One, Eritrea National Policy for Social Protection. Second, a National Strategic Plan for Social Protection of Eritrea 2023 to 2027. The social protection programs are intended for targeted specific groups of the society, such as children, women, unemployed youth, elderly, people with disabilities, and families of martyrs. These programs focus in the following areas: social insurance and pension, food security programs, basic social services, national nutrition program, disaster risk management, support to people with disabilities, support to vulnerable children, support to the elderly, support to martyrs' families, and community-based social support programs. The overall objective of these programs is to ensure their integration in the overarching national development programs. And the priority target groups which have identified in social protection programs are the chronically poor, the economically at risk, and the socially vulnerable. Mr. Chairperson, currently 114 social protection programs are being undertaken in Eritrea. The social protection mapping in Eritrea that was held in 2018 identified those 114 social protection programs. The majority of these programs, that is 83%, are still ongoing, while the rest 17% has been fully implemented. The total budget expended so far for this social protection programs is 21.6 billion NACFA Eritrean currency. In dollars, it is around $1.2 billion, with the government covering around 90% and the remaining 10% being covered by community contributions. Finally, Mr. Chair, 7% of the population in the country live with some form of disability, according to a UN study. In supporting these disabled members of the society, the national policy urges for a holistic approach predicated upon community-based approach, while the government exerts efforts to provide institutions and development programs that take into consideration the disabled segment of the society. The community at large has also a responsibility to support the citizens through voluntary contributions, either financially or materially. Through this combined public and private sector efforts, a number of disabled have been able to open small and medium businesses to sustain themselves and also making humble contribution to the local economy. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
We shall now give the floor to Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, or rather Algeria.
And a lot into social and economic development programs, and our national program 2020 and 2024 would soon be finalized, has gone through a human-centered approach through which we would put the need of every citizen at the heart of our development strategy. So under the leadership of the President of the Republic, it has been decided that the entire budget of the Algerian government would be revised to make it a program budget. So we would have, instead of devoting budget to sectors, for example, health, education, employment, we will devote budget through program with specific targets and indicator to target the number of people, to target the indicator in order to monitor the budget. And this allows the Algerian government to really track its development strategy and invest more. So this is how we know exactly now that the share of social transfer at 20% of our budget, so we'll be always able to plan ahead and ensure that every Algerian citizen will have access to education, to health, to employment and housing. So these are the priorities that we have, and now we are shifting into having what we call a childhood budget. So we would know exactly how the well-being of a child in Algeria would cost to the government. So every sector will have in its budget a program following how we ensure that every Algerian child has its specific need met, regardless of disability, regardless of age, they will all have in their budget a line devoted to the Algerian childhood, because we invest in the human beings, we invest in human resources. So that is the shift that we are making in Algeria in order to ensure that our development strategies meet the needs of the Algerian citizens. And here's the question maybe I will make to the panel. You were talking about a human right-based approach when it comes to national development, but the Algerian government takes more of a development-based approach, through which we would have not the human right as a baseline, but the development need as a baseline. So I would love to hear maybe your comments about that. Thank you.
Merci. Merci, délégué de l'Algérie. INDH, Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, s'ils sont là. Allez-y, vous avez la parole, monsieur. Je vous demanderai simplement d'être bref, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Honorable Commissioner. I would like to begin with a general feedback with regard to experience from Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. We understand that national development cannot avoid including socio-economic rights or other rights. However, they may be formulated in a text that are not familiar to human rights experts. So the question is usually whether the development plan, the national development plan, actually include specific targets on people or persons or group in a vulnerable situation. So the question is to check for those specific targets that address the situation of vulnerable groups. Regarding Ethiopia, we had the opportunity to review and to provide inputs to the Ethiopian National Development Plan. So the challenge that we faced was that we received a short time. Otherwise, we provided comments on that one. Thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner.
C'est moi qui vous remercie, monsieur. Nous passons à présent aux ONG. J'appelle Messoud GBU RETA NGO Consortium of Ethiopian Human Rights Organization. Il n'est pas là. Human Rights Watch. Non plus. Un dernier alors. Center for Human Rights, Monsieur Liod Kyuva. Pas là. Les autres observateurs, Data of Governance Alliance. OK, un autre. African Law, yes? OK, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. I present this on behalf of Data for Governance Alliance, an alliance for CDD Ghana, Institute for Development Studies in the University of Nairobi, Institute for Justice and Reconciliation based in Cape Town, and the alliance is led by the Afrobarometer Project. We are happy our countries have presented data and showing that they have some policies ingrained in the national development plans. Our data comprises 32 African countries that tested the state of human rights, and as we read here last Thursday, we still have gaps in some areas of development issues for marginalized groups, access to education, access to public services, and in some countries, if I use my country Ghana for example, we have adopted marginalized protocols, including protocols for persons with disabilities, especially on access to public facilities. But we still have gaps where you want to access public facilities, there are no runways for people with disability, especially those using wheelchairs. So there are still gaps as far as the data is concerned as to how best we can monitor, track, and report on what we put in the national frameworks and the actual implementation of the provisions that have been made. So there are differences in this, I think, going forward. Both civil society organizations and the national partners must come together to ensure the actual provisions and status of implementation. Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie, monsieur. Je me tourne à présent vers nos panélistes pour qu'ils puissent apporter leurs peut-être conclusions et aussi répondre à peut-être aux 2 questions qui ont été posées pour ce panel, pour que les autres... Il s'agissait plutôt... Ah, ok. Sorry. Commissaire Derso, vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sassi. A very good afternoon to you all, delegates and participants. I would like to join in thanking the members of the panel and the team for this panel. Just a few fundamental questions from my side. First, I would like to understand, I think building on the submission by Commissioner Abdi from the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, what is your conception of determining whether or not a national development plan actually integrates human rights? Is it the fact that it makes reference to a human rights instrument? It's the fact that it makes reference to a specific human rights? Depending on your conception of what actually determines the integration of socioeconomic rights, then you may be inclusive and more realistically appreciate the national development plan's reference to socioeconomic rights. But importantly, I think a couple of important questions. One is whether your analysis also includes, for example, the question of what is the underlying conception of development that the National Development Plan actually is premised on, and whether that conception, underlying conception of development actually can tell us something about the extent to which and whether this can be considered as considerate of and reflective of human rights requirements, not just economic, social, and cultural rights, but broadly speaking, human rights requirements. And finally, the extent to which you take account of the broader policy context in which development plans are conceived. What are the dictates on which development plans are premised, and the extent to which those dictates actually affect what national development plans take account of and can give provision for in terms of economic, social, and cultural rights matters a great deal. So what is the constraint for fiscal policy, for example? What is the role of international trade or investment regulations, international financial regulations? Have you given any consideration at all for these factors? Thank you.
Je vous remercie, commissaire Derso, pour ces observations et ainsi ces questions. Donc je remets la parole à nos panélistes pour qu'ils puissent prendre en charge l'ensemble des questions qui ont été posées. Je commencerai par Dr Dorcas.
Maybe I should start by responding to Dr. Derso about the study on Ethiopia. So the finding that we got from the analysis of the National Development Plan 2030 of Ethiopia is that, well, it has incorporated socio-economic rights sectors, not human rights. And it does not refer or mention any specific international or human rights framework, nor refer to any specific content of the Constitution first. And then, according to the plan, prosperity is measured by the capabilities created to meet human needs, improvement in standard of living, and human perception of the level of their well-being. But the overall finding from the analysis is that there is no human rights language in the plan. There is no reference to even international human rights standard that Ethiopia has ratified, that is the state party to. There is no reference to the Constitution. So that's why we say it has not followed a human rights-based approach, and rather it has followed an economic development approach. And in terms of other principles of the human rights-based approach, for instance, participation, I know we had expert meetings with the development experts from Ethiopia who were from the government and from civil society and national human rights institutions, who the government officials, they have stated that...
So, Dorcas, for your information, I didn't ask about Ethiopia.
Okay.
Please. Okay. I was asking a broader fundamental question rather than about Ethiopia.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Merci, merci. Je passe la parole à M. Folusso, également pour qu'il apporte ses commentaires.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So I think for me, the questions are very, and the comments are very critical questions, and I don't necessarily think, we have to provide all of the answers here, because this, I would assume that is for us to reflect further, because it's an ongoing study, and these are some of the things that we will take home to, reflect on. Maybe just in conclusion, in one word, I think one thing that is obvious is there is a common consensus amongst all the stakeholders that have spoken that there's definitely the need for a human rights-based approach to national development process broadly, because national development plan is just one of the outcome of that process. And now we will take home Commissioner Dresso, the comment from Algeria, the comment from Commissioner Abdul-Jabri to really, reflect on these things and see how we can also use that to improve the studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madame Carole, vous avez également la parole pour vos propos conclusifs.
Okay. Yes, well, thank you very much. And I just want to second what my colleague from NANRI has said about listening and integrating some of these reflections also from Commissioner De Cero in terms of the improvement of the plan. Of our analyses, but maybe just to say in terms of what we have done so far is, of course, the basis for our analysis has been, and the basis for our analysis of the national development plans has been Agenda 2063, and we have looked at what was included there and tried to assess how this is reflected in the national development plans, also in relation to the international human rights instruments, and maybe also to say that one of the things that we think is important when in a human rights-based approach and looking at development and human rights is that the human rights can give more normative content because of the normative content of economic, social, and cultural rights. We get some more legal standards and more rigor to help us in when we are developing development plans and development policies. And we think that by using these standards, it can help states to identify some of the core minimum entitlements that are incorporated in these standards and help guide the progressive realization of these rights. So that is basically what has guided us in the analysis so far. But I think there are very good comments that we, of course, take in and reflect further on.
Je vous remercie, Madame Carole. Je remercie encore une fois l'ensemble des panélistes pour leur présentation. Je remercie par ailleurs...
I'd like to thank the state delegates, national human rights institutions and delegates, and we would like to assure them that their inputs shall be taken in due course by the working group and our partners. And we hope that this study would be brought to attention at the next session. I thank you, and I thank you for your kind attention, and I thank you, Chair, for giving us extra time, and I hand over the floor to you. Item 3, Human Rights Situation in Africa. I would like to thank the panelists and to congratulate them for their brilliant presentations and their concluding remarks on this important topic with respect to development and its mainstreaming in the national development plans. Thank you. Thank you all. Now, item number 3. Now, the panelists would change. Delegation from Malawi. Malawi?
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Commissioners, distinguished delegates, it is a great honor for me to address the African Commission on Human and People's Rights on behalf of the Republic of Malawi regarding the state of human rights in our nation. The government and the people of Malawi are once again pleased to participate in this session. The government of Malawi affirms its commitment towards the advancement of democratic governance, rule of law, and human rights through our liberal constitution and progressive domestic laws. Malawi continues her efforts to ensure that it registers progress in the protection and promotion of the rights of its citizens, including women, children, persons with disability, and the elderly. We would like to share some of the developments that have taken place in Malawi in the promotion and protection of human rights since we last addressed the Commission in May this year. The chairperson, earlier this year, the Republic of Malawi experienced El Niño weather conditions that caused heavy rains and flooding, as well as prolonged dry spells in some parts of the country. These severe weather shocks led to displacement of thousands of people, outbreaks of diseases, and low crop production. The Malawi Vulnerability Assessment Committee carried out an assessment of food insecurity in the country, which projected that a population of 5.7 million people would be in need of food assistance for a period of 6 months from October 2024 to March 2025. The government has put in place measures to assist affected communities. Currently, 325,000 households, translating into 1.5 million individuals, are benefiting from the government social cash transfer program known as Ntokolabakomo, while the Department of Disaster Management has commenced food distribution exercise targeting 5.7 million people across the country. Additionally, as a long-term solution to deal with the adverse effects of climate change and to improve food security, the government is establishing mega farms, reviving irrigation schemes, and providing soft loans for irrigation farming through the National Economic Empowerment Fund. Honorable Chairperson, Malawi will hold its presidential, parliamentary, and local government elections in September next year. The government is actively taking steps to uphold the integrity of the upcoming elections. In preparation for the 2025 general elections, the Malawi Electoral Commission has trained the first cohort of 115 newly recruited constituency civic and voter education assistants. These assistants will be deployed to each of the 229 constituencies for the 2025 general elections. Furthermore, the Malawi Electoral Commission will, from the 21st of October 2024, commence the first phase of voter registration for the 2025 general elections, targeting 12 districts. During the exercise, MEC staff will be accompanied by officials from the National Registration Bureau at every registration center to ensure that individuals who registered with National Registration Bureau do not have their national IDs are given a system-generated receipt which will allow them to be registered. milk will adhere to all the laws that guide the conduct of elections in Malawi, as well as embrace international and regional electoral principles and standards to ensure that the elections are held in free, fair, transparent, and acceptable standards. Honorable Chairperson, to protect vulnerable groups, particularly elderly persons, the government of Malawi enacted the Older Persons Act 2024. The Act, among others, seeks to protect the rights of older persons and promote the safety and security of older persons. And in order to address the rise in cases of human rights violations, including killings of older persons on allegations of witchcraft, the Malawi Human Rights Commission, in collaboration with Ministry of Gender, Social Welfare and Community Development, has finalized the drafting of the National Response Plan on Older Persons Issues in Malawi. The response plan will personalize the Act to achieve its objectives. Honorable Chairperson, in a bid to enhance the promotion of children's rights in Malawi, the first cohort of commissioners of the National Children's Commission took off of office and underwent an orientation workshop. Following the orientation, the commissioners have started discharging their duties to the Commission. And one of such duties is to promote the fulfillment of treaty obligations relating to children and monitor the implementation of concluding observations. Additionally, the Department of Child Affairs under the Ministry of Gender, Social Welfare and Community Development has also finalized developing the National Strategy on Ending Child Marriage 2024 to 2030. The department is also training caregivers for early childhood development and intends to train 30,000 caregivers. Honorable Chairperson, the government of Malawi is committed to the protection of rights of migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. In a recent High Court case involving illegal immigrants in Malawi, the court held that the reasonable period that an illegal immigrant can be held in custody pending deportation should be 30 days, and further prohibited detention of child illegal immigrants in prisons. The government of Malawi has fully complied with the court order. And in June this year, the government of Malawi revived its National Committee on International Humanitarian Law to improve the handling of international humanitarian law issues in the country. Following the resuscitation of the committee in September 2024, the Republic of Malawi co-chaired the 23rd Regional Session in International Humanitarian Law that took place in South Africa. Currently, the Law Commission is reviewing the Refugee Act. The Commission has since conducted preliminary consultation with stakeholders, including refugees. I wish to conclude by reiterating Malawi's commitment to upholding the principles of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. I thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. Je vais prendre 2-3 ONG avant de revenir au panel. Urisa.
Quickly. Can you speak from the podium in the center? Go ahead. 5 minutes maximum. You can even do it 3 because we have the statement already. Is that okay? Do you need assistance? Can someone assist her with a microphone, please? And International Paradigm Initiative, the issue International Pen and Paradigm Initiative should prepare, and thereafter we will continue with the panel discussion. Go ahead. Okay, you can make the statement from your seat. 5 minutes maximum.
Je suis de Zimbabwe et Swatini depuis notre dernière mise à jour en juin. La situation des droits de l'homme est devenue préoccupante, notamment en raison des abus par les forces de défense de Lesotho, confiscation illégale. Les forces de défense de Lesotho ont été accusées de torture et de tueries illicites des citoyens, notamment des tueries de 2 personnes en détention. En dépit des préoccupations, les autorités de Lesotho n'ont pas encore pris des actions substantielles pour aborder cette violation. En Afrique du Sud, nous félicitons l'Afrique du Sud pour avoir promulgué la loi sur l'assurance médicale pour tous. Cependant, il y a des préoccupations par rapport à la bonne gouvernance. En mai 2024, l'Afrique du Sud a été témoin d'une protestation, notamment en Eastern Cape, protestation par les migrants pour l'insuffisance de l'eau potable et de l'assainissement, de l'électricité. Le 29 mai 2024, la police de la période de la province septentrionale a tiré sur des civils, le parti civil. Le gouvernement de l'unité nationale a soulevé des préoccupations par rapport à cette tuerie. En outre, les violences contre les activistes. En 2024, 3 activistes ont été assassinés. Tepo Malesa a été tué le 15 juin 2024 pour avoir piloté une campagne. Cissé Loklani a été assassiné le 14 juin 2024 pour s'être opposé à un projet au KwaZulu-Natal. Ezmakaliso Swandane a été tué en juin 2024 pour avoir exposé des actes de corruption. Cette tuerie crée un environnement dangereux, pernicieux pour les défenseurs des droits de l'homme en Afrique du Sud. En Zambie, la police a à maintes reprises refusé le droit aux partis d'opposition de proclamer leurs droits. Et des abus des droits de l'homme ont augmenté sous le régime du président Akaïma. Il y a eu des lois qui ont été promulguées, mais des progrès substantiels n'ont pas été réalisés et les forces de police continuent à mener des abus. Récemment, en juin 2024, la tuerie de membres de l'opposition et la poursuite de membres de l'opposition à justice ont continué. En dépit des lois, ceci constitue des violations de droit à l'expression en Zambie. En termes de cadre juridique restrictif, le 1er mars 2024, le gouvernement a introduit le projet de loi sur un projet de loi sur l'amendement, y compris la liberté de réunion et d'expression. Il y a eu des abus qui ont été notés dans le cadre de ces droits. Il y a eu des oppositions qui ont été faites et des membres de l'opposition ont été arrêtés. S'agissant des droits des personnes handicapées également, leurs droits sont violés au Zimbabwe. Quant à la région de Sadek, en Eswatini au Zimbabwe, il y a des graves violations des droits humains, également les violations des droits à l'expression et les droits de l'homme. En Eswatini, des efforts pour protéger les droits humains ont été ignorés et des réformes doivent être faites. La condamnation de 2 défenseurs des droits de l'homme, Tandeni, 18 ans, a été en prison et ceci illustre le refus du royaume de souscrire à la protection des droits. Je vous remercie, Cathy. 5 minutes se sont déjà écoulées. Vous avez quelques secondes qui vous restent. Juste une seconde, s'il vous plaît. Bien. Je voudrais simplement passer aux recommandations. Une recommandation seulement, s'il vous plaît. Nous disposons déjà de ce document. Une recommandation, s'il vous plaît. En Afrique du Sud, je dirais que accélérer le financement pour la justice du meurtre de Maleba dans la région. Je vous remercie. Je vais suivre cette question moi-même en tant que rapporteur spécial et j'ai le plaisir maintenant d'inviter International Ped Undugo Mategire Honorable Monsieur le Président, honorables délégués, en vos rangs, titres et qualités respectifs, notre organisation saisit l'occasion qui nous a été accordée pour poursuivre l'interaction avec la Commission des droits de l'homme et des peuples lors de sa 81e session le 31 mars. 23 cas d'attaques, de menaces et de violations de droits à l'expression ont été notifiés. Notre organisation a soulevé des préoccupations par rapport aux droits humains et nous voudrons que la Commission en assure un suivi dans le contexte qui est caractérisé par la négation de la démocratie dans le cadre de conflits armés continus dans 14 pays en Afrique et la violation endémique du droit à la liberté d'expression. Dans la majorité des pays, les pays ne manquent de s'acquitter de leurs engagements et de promouvoir les droits humains pour leurs citoyens. L'existence de constitutions démocratiques dans presque tous les pays sont également signataires des conventions sur les droits humanitaires, ne les empêche pas de pouvoir ne les empêche pas de ne pas protéger les droits humains. Les droits à l'expression, les journalistes et leurs droits continuent d'être violés sur le continent. Des pays tels que l'Érythrée, l'Éthiopie, le Mali, le Rwanda, la Tanzanie, le Zimbabwe, la République démocratique du Congo, le Soudan, l'Égypte, le Burkina Faso, le Cameroun, l'Ouganda, la Somalie, entre autres pays. L'utilisation de moyens répressifs contre les journalistes, les arrestations arbitraires, le harcèlement, les menaces, l'intimidation, les tueries suspectes sont en autres les mesures répressives que le gouvernement use pour punir les voix dissidentes de notre recherche entre les écrivains, les journalistes, les poètes, les dramatistes qui ont été emprisonnés avec la violation de leurs droits. Des journalistes ont été emprisonnés en 2023 au Cameroun 8, en Éthiopie 8, Cameroun 6, Cameroun, République démocratique du Congo, Madagascar, Nigeria, Zambie, un journaliste par pays. 8 journalistes ont été tués dans le cadre de leur travail, 2 au Cameroun, 1 au Lesotho, Mali, Mozambique, Nigeria, Rwanda, Somalie et au Soudan. Dans toutes ces affaires, les gouvernements n'ont pas mené des enquêtes idoines par rapport à leurs droits. L'usage de législation répressive et le manque d'ordre. L'autorité en Ouganda, en Tanzanie, au Kenya, au Zimbabwe, en République démocratique du Congo, au Togo, en Gambie, en Éthiopie, en Somalie, Nigeria, entre autres, continuent d'utiliser la force comme mesure légitime pour aborder des questions telles que la sécurité, le terrorisme et la régulation des médias. En outre, dans 20 pays en Afrique subsaharienne et la violation des droits des LGBT au Ghana, en Ouganda, au Kenya également constitue une préoccupation majeure pour le droit à l'expression. En 2023, au moins 8 pays en Afrique ont mis en œuvre des restrictions internationales pour supprimer l'échange en ligne de l'information de la communication durant les périodes de protestation. Dans certains cas, conflits avec une estimation de 2 millions de dollars de pertes pour l'économie. En Éthiopie, en Tanzanie, en Mauritanie, en Soudan, en Guinée, au Sénégal et au Gabon et autres pays. Par rapport à la violation du droit à l'expression dans le contexte de la protestation, les gouvernements continuent d'utiliser des moyens illicites, notamment la violence des forces de sécurité pour mater les manifestants, y compris l'Angola, le Congo. Le temps imparti s'est achevé, s'est épuisé. Nous sommes préoccupés par cet état des lieux, ce tableau lugubre, et nous demandons, nous exhortons la Commission, la coopération de la Commission pour aborder ces questions. Je vous remercie. Dernière ONG, Paradigme Initiative, Tomedile Matile. Je vous remercie. Vous avez 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît, et nous allons poursuivre le dernier panel du jour. Je vous remercie, honorable Monsieur le Président de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Je voudrais féliciter la Commission à l'occasion du 20e anniversaire du mécanisme sur la liberté d'expression. Nous célébrons les prouesses sur le continent à travers l'adoption de la déclaration et des principes sur l'accès à l'information et la résolution 473 et autres sur l'intelligence artificielle et autres domaines. En dépit de tout cela, par rapport à l'article 9 de la charte, le droit à l'expression demeure une préoccupation. Nous sommes préoccupés particulièrement par des dispositions de criminalisation qui ciblent les médias, qui exposent la corruption. Un journaliste, Ashraf Mouzarez, a été arrêté en Égypte le 22 juillet 2024 à la suite d'une divulgation faite de bandes dessinées en ligne et sur les médias sociaux. Au Malawi, un journaliste, Macmillan Mole, a été arrêté en avril 2024 après avoir publié sur un réseau social l'implication d'un membre du gouvernement. Il a été accusé conformément au droit pénal. Nous sommes également préoccupés par les arrestations arbitraires. Au Burundi, un journaliste a été arrêté en avril 2024 après avoir divulgué des pratiques illicites et a été accusé selon le code pénal. Un rédacteur en chef d'une presse a été également arrêté le 25 avril 2024 sur la publication d'un article divulguant une implication du gouvernement dans une affaire. En ce qui concerne ces droits, nous savons qu'en Éthiopie, des coupures de connectivité a été réduite pour des raisons. Nous sommes également préoccupés par les coupures de connectivité au Kenya à la suite de protestations sur la loi des finances de 2024. Nous exhortons la Commission de l'Union africaine à promouvoir la conformité à l'article 9 de la charte à la suite de ce qui s'est passé au Burundi, au Malawi, au Niger, pour la violation de la liberté des médias par l'utilisation de la force telle que recommandée par la déclaration sur le droit à la liberté d'expression et de ne pas cibler les journalistes et les médias. Également que les États membres promeuvent l'accès à l'Internet et de s'abstenir de coupures de connexion de la connectivité Internet. Je vous remercie pour avoir utilisé 3 minutes. Le plaisir maintenant d'inviter, de remercier Madame Véronica, Madame Bournet, Madame Abbé, Monsieur Jouan, Monsieur Abdelabdid, nos panélistes. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous sommes déjà accoutumés à la patience. C'est un...
Oh, thank you. Shall now have a study on the condition of women deprived of in prisons, and we intend to guarantee the human rights of women prisoners. So I want to refer to the question of overcrowding, lack of sanitation, and precarious health conditions. We are also conscious of the fact that other regional and international instruments enjoin us to separate prisons according to category, and one of the categories is women prisoners. Thus, in this panel, we will talk about the vulnerability of women in prisons, and this is the second time that we are having this panel discussion on, that is, the impact of living of conditions in prisons for women. And I want to do that with partners who deal with this issue. In his letter, which enjoins us to work together with all the stakeholders under this panel, we shall present the overall report on women in prisons in various aspects, as well as the prevention mechanisms that need to be prepared with civil society on the prevention of torture. And we would have also their perspective from the prisons that they've visited. So due to lack of time, I shall give the floor to the members of the panel. We have Ms. Veronica, who is a senior of the Association for the Prevention of Torture. Abdullah, who is in charge of the promotion, regional Casablanca Regional Human Rights Promotion of the Kingdom of Morocco, and we have Mr. Felix Intore, Commissioner, South African Human Rights Commission, Mr. Abdul Asayu, Vice President of the National Authority for the Prevention of Torture, Mr. Joan Duarte, who is Executive Secretary of the Interministerial Committee for the Preparation of Human Rights in Cabo Verde. All these members will contribute so that we have a better understanding of the findings of the study. I shall now give the floor to the first member of the panel, Madam Veronica. I thank you.
Distinguished panelists and representatives of member states, national human rights institutions, civil society organizations, and national preventive mechanisms. It is a great pleasure for the Association for the Prevention of Torture to be addressing the African Commission on Human and People's Rights at this session today and share some preliminary findings from a global report that our association has been working on in collaboration with national preventive mechanisms that are established under the optional protocol to the UN Convention Against Torture from 46 countries across Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, and Latin America. The report is a first initiative that brings together so many national preventive mechanisms from different regions on one thematic aspect. such as the situation of women in prison. And the Association for the Prevention of Torture is very pleased to be supporting and coordinating this initiative, and also would like to really thank all the national preventive mechanisms that have collaborated through in this process. So the report is really is made up of two main components. One component is individual country reports that have been really written by these national preventive mechanisms. And then there is a global analysis that is a summary somehow of the key findings, recommendations, and also good practices across these different countries. So the global report really looks into several aspects that relate to the situation of women deprived of liberty in prison, both in pretrial detention and serving a sentence. So for reasons of time, I would just highlight a few of these issues. So first of all, we're looking into the root causes and the pathways to women's incarceration and the alternative measures to detention. And the findings from our report really confirm the global trend of women in prison being really a small but increasing percentage of the total prison population. In the countries covered in the report, this percentage range between 2% and 8%, with an average of 5%, but is also increasing in most of the countries. And the reasons why actually women end up in prison in many countries is related to drug-related offenses. But other important factors that are really driving women to being imprisoned are really the socioeconomic situation and the systemic discrimination and inequality that women experience in society. And for instance, in some countries, and this is also the case in the African continent, women are still incarcerated for offenses related to behaviors that are applied actually only or in a disproportionate way to women, such as abortion or same-sex relationships or sex outside marriage or sex work. And what we found, which is again a confirmation of a global trend, is that more than a third of women in prison in all these countries are awaiting trial. And in some countries, the rate is even higher, with more than half of women in prison being in pretrial detention. So it's quite a high number of women in this situation. And in recent years, we also acknowledge that there have been important efforts to increase the use of alternative measures to detention for women in contact with the criminal justice system, in particular when it comes to pregnant women and women with young children. However, we also noted that in many cases, alternatives are still underused, and women face specific challenges in accessing these measures. For instance, because in some cases they don't really take into consideration the specific situation of women, or when they do so, they just take into consideration the reproductive role and caregiver role of women. But they don't look at all the other factors that also are important, such as the history of gender-based violence or socioeconomic vulnerability, mental health conditions, and then also the risks to their protection when they are in detention. The report therefore calls for reforms to decriminalize petty offenses, drug-related activities and behaviors such as the ones I mentioned before, and also calls on states to really prioritize the use of alternative measures to incarceration, both in relation to pretrial detention and prison sentences, taking into consideration all these factors that I've also mentioned before. So the second aspect I wanted to highlight is really the certain detention practices that increase the risk of torture and ill treatment for women by their nature, but also for the way in which they are implemented in practice. And particularly, the report looks into practices of body searches, solitary confinement, and the use of means of restraint. And in all these cases, actually, we found the need for better regulation of these practices in national legislation and policies in compliance with the UN Bangkok rules, but also other relevant standards at the regional and international level. And the need to explore alternative measures and implementing associated safeguards. So when it comes, for instance, to body searches, we found that they're really used routinely and systematically on women deprived of liberty without any individual assessment. And also the way they are performed is also very humiliating and invasive. In relation to solitary confinement, also a common trend identified relates to the generalized use of this practice on women as a penitentiary response to conflict and behavioral issue, and also the lack of measures taken by prison services to address the behaviors or circumstances that led to their placement in solitary confinement. It's also the case in some countries that still pregnant or nursing women are placed in solitary confinement despite the prohibition under international standards. And the report also looks at the gender-sensitive, gender-specific needs, and in particular, I would like to mention the mental health care and support that is needed for women in prison. And what I would like to highlight is that really the report calls for replacing medicalized and often security-driven approach to mental health with a more comprehensive and therapeutic rights-based approach to ensure that the risk and needs of women in prison are assessed when they first enter the prison, but also on a regular basis, and that they are provided with really specialized programs. And yes, and finally, I think, just to conclude, because I know that I'm running out of time, it's still the case that, talking about the mental health, that we could see that actually there have been a few positive developments in many countries over the past year in the adoption of mental health legislations, but also in providing really specific measures and programs in prison to address mental health in a broader term, also looking at the risk of suicide and self-harm, but also substance use. So that is very important. But still, it's very, there is a margin of improvement in this regard, which is quite large. And one issue that has been identified across different countries is really the insufficient number of mental health professionals in prison, and the need for regular training also for prison staff on this issue, but also awareness raising among the women who are deprived of liberty and their families. And finally, the report looks also into the specific experience and differential impact of prison on women in special situations of vulnerability, including foreign women, LGBTQI plus women, women belonging to ethnic minorities, indigenous women, and of course pregnant and nursing women and women with their children in prison. And so the report will be launched next month in November, and so we hope that it will be a contribution to this debate to improve the treatment of women in prison, but also to contribute to to better use of alternative measures to detention. Thank you.
Obrigada, Sra. Verónica, por este alinhamento daquilo que se encontra no relatório. Vou passar a palavra para o Sr. Abduladim, que nos vai falar sobre
distinguished delegates, distinguished representatives of national human rights institutions and NGOs, dear panelists, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. First of all, I would like to thank the African Commission on Human and People's Rights for this opportunity to share with you some of the key findings of our national human rights institutions and the national preventive mechanism study on the conditions of women in Moroccan prisons. The Moroccan National Human Rights Council, along with the National Preventive Mechanism's choice of the theme, was particularly motivated by the specific characteristics of this population and the need to conduct an in-depth analysis to identify any potential reforms or measures that could ensure better incarceration conditions for women. Our aim was to comprehensively document the conditions of women's detention and develop a rigorous and systematic assessment that would serve as the basis for achievable and actionable recommendations. The approach adopted by CNDH and the National Preventive Mechanism included a thorough evaluation of the specific needs of the detained women based on individual interviews and review of institutional practices to better understand their experiences and concerns. We would like to highlight that CNDH and NPM places significant emphasis on women in detention as part of its preventive visits by implementing a detailed assessment methodology that examines all aspects related to the detention of women. This includes, among other, direct observations and in-depth interviews with both the detainees and the prison management. Our thematic report covered 43 penitentiary institutions across the 12 regions of Morocco. Interviews were conducted with each of the detained women to optimize the process of visiting places of deprivation of liberty. The CNDH and the National Preventive Mechanism developed an internal digital application. This tool has improved us both and helped us improve both data collection and quick access and effective use of the collected data. The application allows access to the desired information at any time from anywhere using a computer, a tablet, or a smartphone. 15 questionnaires were developed and used to evaluate the 15 selected monitoring processes. The digital application facilitated the entry and processing of more than 2,066 questionnaires, leading to the formulation of over 2,500 findings and 1,300 recommendations. Ladies and gentlemen, through its visits to 43 penitentiary establishments, the National Human Rights Council and the National Preventive Mechanism identified some areas where improvements are necessary to fully align with the requirements of the relevant international standards, including and particularly the Nelson Mandela and Bangkok rules. In terms of body searches, Moroccan law and international standards mandate that all searches of women be conducted by female staff and in private. According to the testimonies collected, searches of female detainees are carried out exclusively by female staff, ensuring privacy and dignity by being conducted out of the presence and sight of male personnel. This practice is in full compliance with the law on the management of penitentiary establishments in Morocco, and it is in compliance also with the international standards outlined in the Mandela Rules, Article 52, and the Bangkok Rules, Article 19. On the other hand, not all body searches are recorded. This lack of procedural documentation presents challenges regarding the ability to monitor and standardize these necessary security operations. While essential for safety, these searches carry the potential risk of leading to mistreatment or traumatic experiences for women in detention. To be noted in this regard that CNDH and NPM recommended in its 2023 annual report to prioritize the use of alternative detection methods and tools such as ultrasound examinations, scanners, and metal detectors. It also emphasized the importance to document searches and their outcomes through a register. This register should include the identity of the individual conducting the search, the reasons justifying the search, and any results obtained. Regarding the use of cellular isolation, according to the staff interviewed in the visited establishment, pregnant women, breastfeeding mothers, women accompanied by babies or young children, as long as women who have recently given birth, elderly women, or women who suffer from chronic diseases, as well as minors, are not subject to this isolation procedure. Any detainee who feels threatened may request to be placed in preventive isolation for their own protection. However, women placed in isolation for their protection retain the right to appeal decisions regarding their placement. They can submit complaints and grievances to the director of the penitentiary establishment, the regional director, the national, the central prison administration, or to the judicial authorities, and complaints also can be sent to the National Human Rights Council. Additionally, the situation can be reassessed based on the recommendations of a psychologist or a physician. A noteworthy positive initiative of Morocco's treatment of mothers in prisons is the program that enables children aged 3 to 5 who reside with their mothers in a correctional facility to attend external daycare centers. This initiative fosters the children's growth and development in a healthy social environment outside the prison, which is crucial for their overall well-being. Moreover, the prison system ensures that mothers receive essential goods, such as hygiene products, food for children, respecting thereby the dignity and basic needs of both the mother and the children. With regard to access to healthcare, although services are available to all detainees, the NPM found that some visited facilities lack psychiatrists and qualified psychiatric nurses. Additionally, the NPM noted issues regarding training programs for health personnel, focused on mental health care, identified some challenging situations for women, and assessing the mental health needs for detainees. CNDH and the National Preventive Mechanism identified some disparities as well in vocational training opportunities for women compared to their male counterparts. Women in prison sometimes lack access to the same range of vocational programs available to men. The CNDH and NPM recommended expanding vocational training programs to encompass a wider variety of skills, equipping women with the necessary tools to lead independent and successful lives after their release. Based on these findings, we propose several recommendations to improve the situation for women in detention. This include, but not limited to, the increase of the availability and the quality of healthcare services, particularly mental health and addiction treatment, ensuring the standardization of procedures for conducting and documenting body searches to ensure transparency and protect the dignity of female detainees, expanding vocational training and employing opportunities for women to better prepare them for life, and finally, ensuring that preventive health programs are widely available, particularly screenings for cancers and other critical health issues specific to women. With that, I pass you the floor, and sorry if I was long, Madam Chairman.
Muito obrigada. Realmente é tema muito apaixonante, pelo que não nos opomos que conclua a sua apresentação. Vir-me agora à minha esquerda e vou pedir...
That you continue with the presentation maybe later on. I would like to turn to my left and I would like to call on your presentation. Please let's observe the time allotted to each one of us.
I rise on all of the protocol that has already been observed. It's an honor to address you today about the vital role women in correctional centers in South Africa. Though we term it correctional centers to reflect the rehabilitative spirit, I will use the word prisons for our discussion this afternoon. South Africa's commitment to human rights is exemplified by the Constitution as well as the Bill of Rights. This commitment is augmented by its ratification or domestication of international and regional instruments, including the United Nations Convention Against Torture in December 1998 and the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, otherwise known as the OPCAT, in June 2019. For our discussion this afternoon, these instruments underline South Africa's human rights commitments, even for persons who may be deprived of their liberty. Since the designation of the South African National Preventative Mechanism, or the NPM, in July 2019, we have made remarkable progress in strengthening the protection of persons who are or may find themselves deprived of their liberty. The South African NPM, coordinated by the South African Human Rights Commission, collaborates with dynamic entities as the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, the Office of the Health Ombud, and the Office of the Military Ombud. During our visits, we have placed vulnerability and heightened vulnerability as the center of our work. As such, we have identified several vulnerable groups that require added protection through the NPM's interventions, including children, persons with disabilities, and the elderly. However, today we shine a light on women in prisons whose stories inspire change. Currently, South African prisons population stands at about 160,000. Women comprise roughly 4,600 of this population, or around 2.96% of the total. Amongst these, nearly 2,000 are awaiting trial and 2,600 are serving their sentence. Amongst these women, some are pregnant, and those who have given birth are allowed to retain primary care of their children until they are 2 years, based on the child's best interest. After this period, the children are placed with guardians outside of the facility. Importantly, these children receive primary health care, including essential immunizations under the expanded program on immunization. This is also based on the equivalence of care principle. Women in prisons are also entitled to medical and psychological evaluations and the provision of 3 nutritious meals a day, along with access to clean water for bathing and drinking. Recently, some prisons have even introduced maternity uniform dresses for expecting mothers. Additionally, women receive personal hygiene essentials such as toothbrushes, toothpaste, soap, and sanitary towels. Upon sentencing, they can also engage in educational and vocational programs like hairdressing, baking, and cooking, allowing them to acquire valuable skills. The skills transfer is part of the rehabilitative efforts to empower offenders and create a pathway from crime and re-offending behavior. Access to reading materials enriches their experience, as many prisons offer libraries filled with books in various South African and even international languages. An exemplary initiative of the Department of Correctional Services is the Funda Mzansi Reading Championship or competition. The Funda Mzansi Reading Championship, meaning Read South Africa, showcases the power of education. This initiative fosters the connection between inmates, community members, and students, highlighting the importance of knowledge and creativity. From humble beginnings with just 6 clubs, this inspiring competition has blossomed into a celebration of literacy, engaging 250 clubs over 5 days. The South African Human Rights Commission is proud to support this initiative, emphasizing culture as a human right. Noting the successes on the treatment of women deprived of their liberty, our monitoring has also revealed some pressing challenges. For example, while food is provided 3 times a day, the timing of these meals often poses a problem, especially for pregnant women and breastfeeding women. The last meal is frequently served too early in the afternoon, leaving long periods until breakfast, which can lead to discomfort and health issues. Access to clean water can sometimes be a challenge. In some communities surrounding the prison, the availability of clean water is inconsistent, and this also affects the prison population, thus directly impacting personal hygiene. We have also found that the quality and quantity of sanitary products provided to women is inadequate, necessitating improvements. Healthcare access, while present, falls short in terms of gender-specific services. Women often do not receive necessary gynecological care or preventative screenings, such as pap smears and vaccinations, which are crucial for their health and well-being. The protocols surrounding body searches are also an area of concern, as my other colleagues have highlighted. Although the law mandates that searches be conducted by same-sex or same-gender officials, in practice, these searches can be intrusive. Mental health care also remains a significant gap in our services in South Africa. While initial screenings are conducted upon arrival, ongoing mental health support is often insufficient. It is essential to expand these services to ensure comprehensive care for all inmates. Looking ahead, we have made several recommendations to address these issues. Firstly, we must increase the quantity of food provided and adjust serving times to better meet the needs of vulnerable populations. We have recommended the need to ensure consistent access to clean water and to improve the quality of sanitary products that are offered. Additionally, we recommend the implementation of comprehensive gender-specific healthcare protocols, ensuring that all necessary screenings and treatments are available. Revising body search procedures to enhance dignity and respect for women is also crucial, as is expanding mental health support within these facilities. I would be remiss, Chairperson, if I did not highlight the recent establishment of the Gender Responsive Center in Attridgeville, Johannesburg. This prison is designed with the United Nations rules for the treatment of women prisoners and non-custodial measures for women offenders, also better known as the Bangkok Rules, in mind, and represents a significant step in addressing the unique needs of women in prison, promoting rehabilitation and successful reintegration in alignment with international human rights norms and standards. In partnership with the APT, we have also developed a guidance tool adapted from the original Bangkok Rules. This guidance tool identifies priority areas into 8 categories and adds 2 additional categories, namely facility data and documentation. Given the many aspirational principles and strategies within the Bangkok Rules, this guidance tool narrowed its focus to 3 principles with 10 subcategories. These 3 principal areas are health, mental health, as well as security. The guidance tool can be used to measure, monitor, or improve basic conditions of detention in women's detention facilities, as well as improve record keeping, documentation, and reporting of or about women in detention and the management of facilities. It can also be used to assess compliance with the Bangkok Rules, but this is not the absolute intention of the tool. It is recommended that this tool be used as a baseline and a guideline, and that it is accompanied by contemporaneous notes and observations. Lastly, Chairperson, I must note that exploring alternatives to detention, such as community corrections, can provide a viable option for some women, facilitating their rehabilitation and reducing the overall prison population. For instance, government is collaborating with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in piloting alternatives to detention for vulnerable groups such as women. It is imperative that we continue to address the specific needs of women in prisons, promoting their dignity, health, and successful reintegration into society. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada pela sua exposição. Vamos
for your presentation. We will immediately hear from Mrs. Abid, and she will speak on the situation in Tunisia. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Commissioner. All protocols duly observed. It's a pleasure for me to be present here today to talk about women in prison, the reports, and this is from the perspective of the NHRI of Tunisia. I would like to thank APT for this initiative. Tunisia is a small country in terms of size in the north of Africa, has a population of about 12 million inhabitants. Tunisia has ratified the United Nations Convention Against Torture in 1988 and its optional protocol in 2011. It promulgated the law establishing its national prevention mechanism in 2013. It is the first mechanism in the MENA region, and the mechanism has become operational in 2016. With regards to women in prison in Tunisia, there's only one prison that is dedicated to women, where half of the female detainees of the country are detained. The other women are in 7 other prisons that are spread in 7 governorates. Of 32,000 detainees and inmates in Tunisia, women constitute 3% of this prison population. Only 33% of women have been sentenced. I will briefly talk about the aspects relating to treatment of women in prison. The regulations in Tunisia expressly prohibit body searches, full body searches, and they are prohibited. And it is recommended that X-rays are done to establish the situation of the women. Now, with women who are visiting their families in prison, the law governing prisons refers to searches, but practically speaking, these visits take place in separate rooms. Women just pass through a security doorway or to be subjected to a metal detector. Now, with regards to isolation, the rules of UN states that is only 2 weeks of detention for disciplinary purposes are allowed, and the disciplinary isolation of women is exceptional in Tunisia. During our monitoring visits, we were able to note in the prison exclusively for women that these areas are prepared for the storage of the supplies for the prison. It was not used by the prison as a punishment. Women who are pregnant or lactating have certain benefits. We were not able to note during a visit about any sign of medical sedation in the prison. For access of women to health care in Tunisia, you must have a health visit. It is a routine visit. It looks at the pre-existing conditions and lesions. It is not interested in assessing the mental health of women, and this only relates to cases that are deemed serious. It is important to underscore that the official nomenclature of drugs in the prison are not do not have the same names as they normally do. Chronic illnesses are not checked systematically, as would be the case of women outside prisons. In these hospitals, we know that certain health products like creams cannot be delivered to the women only through the prescription from a doctor. With regards to the relationship of women with the external world, it is possible to have family visits for people under 13 under legal authorization or from authorization from the prison, but sexuality is not authorized in prison because conjugal visits are not provided for by under prisons laws in Tunisia. For vulnerable women or for breastfeeding women, they can do so in special zones, and they can maintain their children for up to the age of 2 years. With regards to alternative to detention, sentences that are non-preventive of detention are not levied on women because of their vulnerability. In the light of this situation, our monitoring system came up with some recommendations that take on board women in prison, the establishment of protection for mental health, and to take into account the specific needs of women in detention, and to promote the use of non-preventive measures.
But then these recommendations, to implement them, apart from the will of the institution, they require financial resources. I thank you for your attention, and I hope I respected the time allocated to me.
Mr. João Duarte, please share the experience of Cabo Verde. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I would like to start by greeting the panelists and the Chair, the Commissioner, delegates of member states, and also representative of institutions of human rights and representatives of NGOs and civil society, all protocol duly observed. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank the organization of this session of the Commission on Human and People's Rights. My intervention will focus mainly on the situation of women in prisons in Cape Verde, sharing our experience with everyone here. Cape Verde is a state of rule of law that respects the rule of law, justice and peace, and has the respect of dignity of human lives, assuming the promotion, respect, and guarantee of human rights has a reference that is cross-cutting to all sectors of governance in the country. We have regulations and policies to create conditions for the normal operation of institutions, public and private, including NGOs, providing an environment for normal operational and exercise of citizenship, promotion and protection of human rights in the country. Our president have made reforms, legal reforms, institutional reforms, and procedural reforms to promote the enjoyment of human rights for citizens and also for those who have chosen Cape Verde to live, to ensure that everyone live with dignity. In Cape Verde, we have currently around 38 women in prison, 9 in preventive and 29 that were judged. Our population is 2,000 inmates, and women represent 1.7% of the total amount of the inmates. We do not have specific prison establishments for women in Cape Verde. However, in all central prisons of the country, we have a department for women in order to ensure the security of women. In our regional prisons, we don't have women who are kept there. In case that happens where we have women in those prisons, the law provides that there should be a separation between men and women. We do not have situations where we have pregnant women in prisons in Cape Verde. And currently we have one case of one child in prison that has 3 months. And we also have currently 4 foreign women in prison, 2 from Brazil, 1 from Equatorial Guinea, and 1 from Portugal. And we don't have women with disability in our national prisons. We do have in total 262 prisoner agents in our prisons, and 74 are women, which represents 28.4% of the total of prisoner agents. The search is made according to the Code of Execution of CONOPE, and also these inmates do not feel comfortable with these procedures. We can use alternative methods of search, such as metal detection or portable instruments, and the law provides for the use of synetechnic means in situations provided in the Execution Code of Penal Sanctions. Both the inmates and visitors are searched by female agents, far from men. This intimate search is prohibited by law, and it's only allowed in exceptional circumstances, such as in situation of suspicion of the visitor is carrying objects whose possession is considered illegal or irregular, or the objective is to introduce in the prisons, or also to give to the inmates. For the realization of this search, women have to consent. So this penal code establishes the conditions and procedures related to isolation. The isolation should only be done in exceptional cases, has a large resource, and it cannot be more than 20 hours per day, and it cannot exceed 15 consecutive days. These laws also provides for the inmate in isolation to be visited by a medical doctor from the prison, and the isolation should not be applied to inmates with disabilities and women with children. And this isolation is used in 4 situations of inmates that are sent to the prison, and before they go to sectors, they are sent to isolation for adaptation to these prisons. We don't have situation of discrimination regarding the placing of women in isolation. There is a registration of the date and hour of the entrance in the isolation area. At the entrance of the isolation, the inmates are assessed which has a multi-purpose objective, and a team composed of a nurse and psychologist are the ones assessing, and the nurse makes the search, and in case there's a need of mental health care, these women prisoners are sent to treatment. Our prisons where we had the study done, we have one nurse and one doctor that assesses the inmates every 2 days. In cases where we have dangers, we refer these inmates to other hospitals. The issue of mental health of women in this in our prisons are an important element for us, and we have taken actions to sensitize these women prisoners and also the agents in these prisons. During these trainings, we have focused on gender and humanized treatment in prisons. And for these women prisoners, we have organizations that work on this area and provide sensitization to them. To summarize, our law provides for a set of rules for women prisoners. Even though there are no specific prisons for women, we ensure the separation between men and women. And we also do the search exclusively by female agents. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. João, for sharing the experience of Cape Verde. After this session, I would like to use the 10 minutes I have so that we can have comments. I have people who have asked for the floor. I'll give the floor to Angola first and then to Burkina Faso. You have 3 minutes. Thank you. I'm Conceição Yanga, National Director of Equity and Gender in Angola. Distinguished commissioners, representatives of member states, representatives of national institutions of human rights, NGOs, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Allow me to use this opportunity on behalf of Angola in this excellent panel that talks about the situation of women in prison. The Republic of Angola, although the persistence of barriers and challenges in the current years, we have registered advancements in the participation of women in decision making. The voice of women is becoming stronger, and for the first time, we have women that are occupying important positions in the legal system, where the president of the Constitutional Court and the prosecutor is women. And we also have in the Supreme Court who is the vice president. And Angola continues to work in order to ensure that justice is provided in a fast way without discrimination through extending the network of courts to ensure justice that is close to people, and also takes into account the administrative division. In the last years, we had advancement in the production of laws, where we have approved a new penal code, a new criminal code, and other laws. Our criminal code harmonizes its penal legislation with no international standards on human rights. To strengthen their access to justice of vulnerable groups, and including women, our constitution provides for legal aid that is free and is implemented to the Bar Association of Angola with the support of the state. Regarding the condition of detention, we have 42 prisons with capacity of 22,000 inmates, and they have a female side, and we have an hospital and a psychiatric hospital, and the inmates have medical services, including psychological assistance. And we would like to emphasize that in Angola there are no overloading of our prisons due to low rates of criminality of women. Our prisoner services implement measures to facilitate communication and interaction between the prison, the inmate community, and the families, which is important for women. As an example, during the COVID pandemic, we started a project that ensured communication between inmates, families, and lawyers virtually. And lastly, I would like to emphasize the role of the Ombudsman that aims at defending the rights of citizens and ensures through formal means justice and legality of the public activity sector. And the Ombudsman created a commission responsible for following up the situation of citizens in vulnerability, including women. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to give the floor to Burkina Faso.
Thank you, Honorable Commissioner. It is the Human Rights Commission of Burkina Faso. Since 2021, the National Human Rights Commission of Human Rights of Burkina Faso, what we did was we contributed to the report, which is the subject of this panel. This was based on what we have seen on the ground, which was done during its monitoring mission, especially the Gendarmerie Brigade and police, as well as the prisons. By and large, what we have noticed on the ground is that some rights of detainees have efforts remain to be done by the government. The respect to the remand period, detention period, the right to the freedom of religion, as well as the absence of cases of torture that we are able to underscore. However, there are some challenges that have to be overcome. It should be stated that Burkina Faso does not have specific prisons for women, but then the prisons law provides for separations between men and women. So in each prison, there is an area reserved for women. Most of the time, the conditions are better compared to the wing reserved for men. challenges. Another challenge is that the rules are not gender sensitive, but also we have noticed that in some remand cells, in some police stations, the fact that there are no police officers, it means that they resort to other women to do the body search for those in remand. Also, what we were able to note is that in most of the prisons there is no facilities for newborns. It's only in the Wagadugu prison that there is a dedicated area to be used by women who have children. This is what we were able to see on the ground, and we thank you for kind attention.
Thank you. I give the floor to Tunisia.
Thank you, Honorable Commissioner, for giving me the floor. I would first and foremost like to thank the panelists for their presentation, and personally I have learned a lot by listening to them during this session. I would want to say that we support the presentation made by the former chairperson for the organization administrator, and we would like to commend them, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Tunisia. After finalizing, I would like to know if we do have NGOs who would like to take the floor on this panel. If so, I would like to ask you to raise your hand, and we don't have. I think that we are tired. I will ask each of the panelists for 2 minutes to make their comments about our panel, and you can complement what you had to say and you were not able to say. I'll start by you.
Honorable Commissioner. Maybe just a couple of things. So one, in general, I think what we've heard also from our distinguished panelists, I think there have been many, I think, advances and progresses in different countries on this area. I think there's more and more awareness and more normative framework supporting really the protection of the rights of women, the preservation of liberty. So I think there is a very good basis to continue working towards a better protection, but also towards making really a better use of alternative measures. So women who are eligible for alternative measures can actually not end up in prison. And just, I also wanted to make a point on hoping that this global report can really also contribute to regional efforts by the Commission, notably the study, the future study on prisons. Hopefully, this report can provide inputs to that study as well. Thank you.
Obrigada, Sra. Comissária.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. If there is a common thread that is running through the experiences of all of these countries, is one, that there has been significant improvements in the ways in which women who are incarcerated are treated by their governments and by the justice system in the respective countries. However, there still remain significant areas of improvement. One of those which is common across board is the provision of healthcare services, particularly when it comes to mental health care services for women. That is a primary goal, and we are hoping that some of these takeaways, particularly when it comes to the recommendations, are going to also be stressed to governments, the provision of mental health care services for women who are in prisons. The standardization of procedures is also a very critical issue. While there is practices, there is no standardization of these procedures across board, which means that these practices become very difficult to monitor and also to ensure that the procedures are in line with the laws of the respective countries and correctional centers. What is also coming out quite clearly is that although women form the larger majority of national and global populations, they encompass the lower numbers of those who are in correctional centers. And when they are in correctional centers, it is because of socioeconomic issues and drug-related issues, as the report from the APT is highlighting. What that means is that there is a higher need for us to think about alternatives to detention, which alternatives also address the reasons that women are in correctional centers, drug-related reasons, socioeconomic reasons, so that the time that one spends being detained is a rehabilitative and corrective period, rather than a time when one has more opportunity to reoffend. With that, we thank you very much, and we must also just congratulate the APT for the sterling work that has been done in this report, and we look forward to participating and partnering with the APT in taking this work forward. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigada mesmo, senhora Abi.
Merci, honorable commissaire.
Honorable Commissioner, we have noted in the light of the various interventions that there is a desire to take into account the vulnerable nature of imprisoned women, but I believe a lot remains to be done to enable us align with international standards, everybody on their side, because apart from the will, financial and material wherewithal is necessary to implement all these recommendations. I would also like to thank you for this initiative to prepare a war report. This is an important report to analyze the situation of women in prisons in various parts of the world. It is a good initiative whilst we are waiting for the finalization of this report, and we will share this with you in due course.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to Mr. João Duarte. 2 minutes.
I thank you, Chair, for giving the floor. Despite the fact that women account for 7% of the global prisoner population and 1.5% on the continent, despite the fact that it's below the global average, we note that in the last couple of years, there has been increase in number of women involved in crimes, leading to increase in the population of women in prison, especially women accused of drug trafficking and other non-violent crimes. So the drop in proportion does not mean that countries should not put in place preventive measures to address the situation. I shall now give the floor to
Observações finais, desculpa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All the points have been made. If there's one or two recommendations I would like to stress, the first one is we've all heard that the different concerns, issues regarding the conditions of women in places of detention result from a rather weak or the complete lack of a gender-specific approach in the judiciary system with regard to access to justice and in the penitentiary legal and institutional framework. So we would like to urge all stakeholders to work in order to integrate this approach. And on another level, I could only agree with all the panelists here that we should urge for the adoption of alternative sentencing measures. Morocco recently adopted the law on alternative sentencing, and we hope to see this kind of measures reducing the incarceration of women in the first place. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Muito obrigada, Sr. Abdulaziz.
I thank Mr. Abdulaziz. We've come to the end of our panel discussion. And this panel focused on the issue of imprisoned women and women in the world in general. And the panel would the discussions are meant to enable women to focus on the issue of women in prisons and also look at the issue of discrimination against women in prisons. And these women who tend to be in prisons do not commit violent crimes, but crimes which relate to their social situation. So we would like to appeal to all those who can do something so that the situation of women in prison, as we discussed, could be improved upon, and in order to could be improved upon. I thank you, Chair, and I'm sorry for having gone beyond the time allotted to us. This reflects the fact that this is a very important issue. Thank you. This report would be a source of inspiration for the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and we know that with our promotion missions that the situation in prisons is very mediocre, and this is a general situation in all the 54 countries, and that involves overcrowding and very deplorable conditions under which these women are imprisoned, and as well as the issue of children snatched from their mothers as they are forced to be in prison. And so such a women, the children of such women, they do not enjoy the affection of their mothers who are in prison. And this is something which we should have extensive discussions on in order to improve upon the situation of women in prison. And Democratic Republic of Congo, as I stated in my remarks, has taken note of the situation by releasing 1,600 prisoners. Other countries have also done that, and there are some countries that are dragging their feet in doing that, but from time to time they should reset the system in order to improve upon the conditions in prison. Thank you very much, Commissioner, and we shall now have 15 minutes for for discussions. And I appeal to the interpreters to give us 15 minutes so that we can cover the human rights situation in Fiakat. Status number 40. So 15 minutes and then we adjourn. Fiakat, are they here? If you can do it in 3, I'll be very happy because we are lagging behind. So you can make your presentation. Thank you very much, Chair. I stand beside for Fiakat. Chair, Fiakat and Azakat are deeply concerned about the human rights situation in several countries of the continent where our members of our network are active. The Democratic Republic of Congo, the decision of the government to lift the moratorium on the discussions initiated in 2003 could lead to the execution of about 1,000 people, whereas people have been condemned to death since the lifting of moratorium on June 24. Others are also waiting in the on death row. Therefore, we have noted various violations, and such as the violation of the physical integrity, arbitrary arrest, and false accusations, and court procedures which led to people to flee, and there have also been accusations which lead to death sentence, according to as issued by the Minister of Justice on 3rd March 2024. Fiakat cautions about, would like to caution about the surge in death sentence as a result of the surge in armed groups and other terrorist groups on the African continent, and would like to reiterate the report of the UN Secretary General, according to which nothing makes it. There is no proof that that death penalty does not serves as a deterrent. In Burundi, we would also like to draw your attention to the grave violation of human rights prior to the elections. Those responsible for these violations on both sides, and we are also witnessing the shrinking of the civil space, and this shows the measures put in place by the government of Burundi to intimidate population and restrict freedom of expression. Journalists also continue to be arbitrarily arrested and detained. The recent presidential pardon accorded to Flora and Bangu shouldn't make us forget that he was arbitrarily detained before being condemned at the highest level for exercising his right to press freedom. Other journalists, stars, and the murder of other newspapers continue to be detained arbitrarily. Our organization continues to denounce the judgment by the Supreme Court of February 2021, which condemned 12 human rights defenders in exile to prison terms, and we want to condemn, deplore the attacks against human rights defenders in Burundi. Fiakat wants to draw attention to the increasing attacks on NGOs and who deprive them, and as well as their imprisonment and our activities in several countries, including Cameroon, Congo, Niger, Cote d'Ivoire, and Benin, have been affected by restrictions and suspension of NGOs and their condemnation to prison in violation of national and international obligations. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, despite extreme overcrowding in prison and violent events in prison, such as the Makalas prison in September, authorities continue to refuse access to NGOs and leading to the withdrawal of medical support for those in jail. And Fiakat would like to also mention the cases of prisoners who have been imprisoned. And in April, we undercarried monitoring service in several prisons, which noted that only 5 of the prisons had an infirmary. And the violations of human rights have also increased, especially violation of the rights of minors in the Garaba prison in Banki, which had about 1,500 prisons for 400 places. And we've also noted the case of preventive detention, which contributes to overcrowding of prison. In terms of recommendations, Chair Fiaka calls on the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to investigate such situations and urge states concerned to respect their regional commitments in terms of human rights. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. We shall now look. We have SAPM Bo Fernandez. 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I am addressing you on behalf of FIACAT and Global Coalition Against the Death Penalty. On the African continent, there is a trend towards abolition of the death penalty over the last couple of years. And today, out of the 55 member states of the African Union, 27 have abolished death sentence for common crimes, and 18 observe a moratorium on execution, and 9 have abolished it completely. And though there has been improvement, the trend observes are very worrying. Since 2023, only 2 states, Zambia and Ghana, have totally abolished the sentence. And however, the number of executions have also increased, and number of there are 4 countries. In the 4 countries, those who have been sentenced to death sentence have increased. In the DRC, Kenya, Nigeria, Egypt, executions were also recorded in at least 2 African countries in 2023, in Egypt, Somalia, and the DRC. The moratorium on executions, which dates back to 2003, has been lifted by the Congolese authority, and that was at the beginning of the year. Though we regret the lack of transparency in the dissemination of figures, which marks an important stage in effective dialogue towards death sentence. Though capital sentence only affects a small number of people, in reality it affects the entire population, because it constitutes a violation of the right to life and also violates the very principles of rule of law. Though most of those given death sentence in Africa are women. Women often become direct victims because they are mothers, daughters of those sentenced to death. In the 2024 and 2025, the situation of some countries will be considered, and this will be the case of DRC, Kenya, and we hope that African diplomacy will use the opportunity of the UPR and make concrete recommendations to ensure that states make progress in abolition of death sentence. In 2024, UN member states would be able to position themselves by voting on the decision of the General Assembly for a moratorium on universal moratorium on death sentence. In last vote in December 2022, 20 members of the African Union voted in favor of the resolution. 13 abstained, 6 did not vote, and then 3 voted against. And so we call on states to vote largely in favor of this test in December this year, and to vote consistently to abolish death sentence. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much, ACPM, Julia Bobon Fernandez. Are you here? Number 368.
Reproductive rights is grateful for the opportunity to address the Commission Today, we wish to bring to your attention the mistreatment of women during childbirth, a form of obstetric violence. This violation occurs in maternal health care settings, manifesting as physical abuse, non-consensual medical procedures, denial of care, and verbal humiliation. Obstetric violence is a grave violation of human rights that undermines women's autonomy, dignity, and the right to health. It contributes to high maternal morbidity and mortality rates across Africa. Women facing this violence are subjected to fear, disempowerment, and severe emotional and physical trauma during childbirth, a time when they should feel safe and respected. It is crucial that governments and policymakers treat this issue with the urgency it deserves. Women must be able to trust that their dignity and autonomy will be respected when they seek health care, especially during childbirth. We call on the Commission to intervene by urging state parties to take the following actions: to strengthen legal frameworks to ensure that obstetric violence is recognized and addressed as a form of gender-based violence and human rights violations, to improve maternal health services by investing in healthcare infrastructure and train providers on dignified maternal health care, ensure that justice systems develop robust grievance mechanisms that allow women to safely report cases of obstetric violence, and again to increase access to maternal health care and ensure that women in undeserved areas can access these services. The Center for Reproductive Rights stands ready to collaborate with the Commission, state parties, and all stakeholders in ensuring that maternal health care is safe, respectful, and dignified for all women across Africa. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. To the center. MBDHP, Ulrich Marie-Donald. MBDHP. You are there? MBDHP, vous êtes là? Non. Centre de documentation de formation sur le droit de l'homme, CDFDH. ESO Dom Conga, 525 numéro. Pas là. Africa Albinism Network, Kwame Andrews Daklo, 493. Pas là. Committee for Justice, Dignity Danish Institute, Ahmed Mefrey, 566.
Yes.
Yes, 5 minutes maximum.
Honorable Commissioner of African Commission on Human and People Rights, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am here to raise a serious issue, the overall human rights situation in Egypt, which continue to worsen across many areas of life. In Egypt, many people face political repression. The government has arrested thousands of activists, journalists, and the people who peacefully express their opinions. They are often detained for long periods without a fair trial or legal procedures. The government uses broad anti-terrorism law to silence activists, and the many who speak out against the government are labeled as a terrorist or enemies of the state. Conditions in the prisons and detention centers are extremely harsh. Prisons are overcrowded, dirty, and lack proper medical care. Many political prisoners suffer from torture and abuse, and some die due to neglect or their health need. Solitary confinement is also common, leaving detainees isolated for long periods. These conditions are specifically hard on political prisoners and those arrested for exercising their basic rights like freedom of speech. In addition, freedom of expression is very limited in Egypt. The government has shut down independent news outlets, and the journalists are frequently arrested or threatened. Even social media is monitored, and people can be arrested for things they post online. Protests and peaceful gatherings are banned or broken up by force. Many Egyptians experience enforced disappearances, where people are taken by security force and their families have no idea where they are or if they are safe. These disappearances often involve torture and long-term detention without trial. Finally, civil society is under attack. Organizations that work on human rights are being shut down, and their staff face arrest, travel bans, or harassment. These groups are vital for ensuring basic freedoms, yet they are being silenced. Moreover, transnational repression has become a new strategy for the Egyptian government, targeting Egyptian civil society and activists living abroad. Egyptian authorities have extended their repressive reach beyond the borders, intimidating and harassing decent who fled for safety. This cross-border crackdown include threats, revocations of passports, and pressure on foreign governments to exonerate or silence Egyptian activists abroad. These actions undermine international human rights, protecting and create an environment of fear for activists seeking refuge. In conclusion, the situation in Egypt is deeply concerning. I call on African Commission to take action and to help ensure that Egypt respects the rights of its citizens. The lives and the freedoms of thousands depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have the request of the floor of the Republic of Egypt. It must be the right to reply, yeah?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. You have the floor.
شكرا سيادة الرئيس. أود فقط التعليق.
In Egypt, there are no political prisoners, contrary to what has been asserted by the previous speaker. The penal code, the penal code of Egypt is very clear. We do not imprison anyone. We don't have political prisoners. It's only after a legal and transparent trial by the courts that someone will be imprisoned, and that is even based on facts and transparent, in line with the international and regional commitments of Egypt. Also, we believe that the accused is innocent until proven otherwise. So the presumption of innocence is applied in Egypt, and all trials are transparent, and the Egyptian state also continues to make amendments in order to improve upon the laws, and also to enable prisoners to have lawyers to receive their families, and for those who are also sick to be given care. And so, in closing, Chair, I want to reiterate that Egypt pledges to comply with all its national, regional, and international commitments, including the African Charter and all the regional protocols issued by the international organizations. And so, the state of Egypt, I will say, is trying to respect all human rights instruments and respect the rights of also women, the older persons, and children. Thank you very much. And the other international instruments, now, who is the country reporter for Egypt has heard you, so it's incumbent on her to follow that. We have 2 minutes. I promised that we would only have 20 minutes, so I have 2 minutes, and I shall FIDA Kenya Elizabeth number 366 because she's about to travel. FIDA Kenya.
And some seconds. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Honorable Chairperson of the Commission,
the Vice Chairperson, distinguished delegates, my name is Elizabeth Ampere, and I'm representing the Federation of Women Lawyers Kenya, that is FIDA Kenya, and the Awesome Consortium that is comprised of the Forum for Women in Democracy in Uganda, Women Challenge to Challenge in Kenya, Sikh Women in Development Association, Ethiopia Women with Disability National Association, and Womankind Worldwide. The above-mentioned organizations are engaged in efforts to strengthen women's rights movements by promoting increased diversity, less fragmentation, and more representative engagement, including by women with disabilities. We collectively affirm our commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms in Africa and acknowledge that progress has been made. Nevertheless, we express concern that diverse women, groups, and communities across the continent continue to experience grave and persistent challenges. We note that at least 44 African Union member states have civic space situations that are rated as obstructed, replaced, and closed. Stringent regulation of civil society continues to persist across the continent, with many African countries having strict laws that require CSOs to register with government authorities to operate legally. As the Awesome Consortium, we emphasize the importance of protecting the rights of all citizens, including those of marginalized groups, indigenous persons, persons with disability, refugees, and internally displaced persons. And we also urge all AU member states to enact and enforce legislative and other institutional, administrative, and policy measures that protect the rights of diverse women and girls, with a focus on gender transformative education to dismantle harmful stereotypes and cultures whilst strengthening access to justice and enhancing gender equality. Your Excellence, in this 81st session, we call upon Africa member states to cooperate fully with international human rights mechanisms, including granting unrestricted access to independent monitoring bodies to investigate and address human rights violations. We also emphasize the importance of protecting the rights of all citizens, including marginalized groups, indigenous persons, persons with disability, refugees, and internally displaced persons. Further, we urge member states to recognize and adopt the International Labour Organization Convention 190 that was adopted by Kenya and Ethiopia, and we take note and also congratulate Uganda for its most recent ratification of the convention and call upon domestication by all African states. And finally, Your Excellence, we call upon member states to enforce equal participation and meaningful participation by women in all political processes on the continent. We call upon for the entrenchment and recognition of women's rights to participation and leadership, which plays a key role in the effective implementation and necessary acceleration of the Africa Union Gender Strategy Action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And, the delegates of member states, NGOs, and NHRIs. What we will do tomorrow morning, we will take some minutes again to call some NGOs. Those who are leaving, we apologize too much, but they can leave the statement to other NGOs who are still on ground. We'll give them the floor so that they can read the statement on their behalf. Thank you very much. So we have to stop here. I request is 20 minutes. I cannot abuse. La session est levée. Nous allons nous voir demain matin. Madame Abiola, you have some announcements?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, for giving me the floor. I would like to announce a side event taking place right after the session. It's a side event on torture prevention in Africa and the need for African countries to support the campaign for a torture